Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, Andrew Jones of Tar Heel Illustrated. That is the Rivals site for North Carolina. He has some background on Jerry Stackhouse that I think you will find very interesting. Our show is sponsored by the Well Coffee House, a Nashville area coffee house that provides fresh roasted coffee along with house-made pastries, breakfast and lunch offerings. 5 locations in the Nashville area. Those are in Brentwood, Green Hills, downtown, Bellevue, and the Cool Springs Lifeway. More information can be found at wellcoffeehouse.org. The Well Coffee House, where coffee changes lives. We also thank our co-sponsor, Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center, which is located in the Gulch. Our news sponsored by Sutherland and Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in an accident, call Taylor or Russell at 615-846-6200 to see what your rights are and if they can help. Well, Vanderbilt has hired Jerry Stackhouse as its men's basketball coach. That will be the topic of today's podcast. And in baseball, Vanderbilt wins at Middle Tennessee State. That score 15-3. J.J. Bleday with the pair of home runs. The Commodores host Arkansas this weekend. Joining us now is Andrew Jones of Tar Heel Illustrated. That is the rival site that covers North Carolina. Of course, North Carolina is the alma mater of Jerry Stackhouse, Vanderbilt's new basketball coach. Andrew is here to talk about Jerry Stackhouse. Andrew, thank you for joining us today.
Happy to be here, as always.
It has been an interesting journey since Vanderbilt fired Bryce Drew. Jerry Stackhouse's name, honestly, when it first came up, I did not take it seriously enough. That was my mistake. About a week before he was hired, I started to figure out, hey, this is a pretty serious deal. And, of course, he is now Vanderbilt's coach. Just your big picture thoughts on his hire and the fit at Vanderbilt.
Well, I see where you're coming from with what your initial thinking was, because we often, not often, but on the occasion where we hear of a former NBA player, someone who had a lot of success at the NBA level, when they actually get into college coaching, it's usually at an alma mater. Clyde Drexler did it at Houston. Of course, that didn't last too long. Penny Hardaway is currently doing it at Memphis. There are other examples, and usually it doesn't work. It doesn't work because the guy's been out of the college game for a long time, and it's a different animal, not so much on the court as it is just in dealing with so many of the responsibilities that go with being a college coach. With Jerry, what makes his situation a little bit different is that, A, he's not coaching his alma mater. He actually went and took another job. And it's an interesting job. I think one that certainly has some challenges that will more fortify him as a college coach. The challenges of getting kids into Vanderbilt is certainly different than they are getting kids into Memphis or Houston, since those are the examples I gave. And also, Jerry has kind of set out a course to get to this point, and maybe even more down the road, since he stopped playing. And he didn't do it. He didn't get this job just because he's Jerry Stackhouse. He's coached, and he's learned about coaching. He spent some time at UNC. He's gotten to know Roy Williams even more. He's been around the program a lot. He's watched practices. He's taken notes. This has been something that he has set out to do. He is now detached himself from being an NBA player and everything that goes along with that, and he's embarked on a new career. It's not like, hey, this would be fun to coach, this alma mater or wherever. He's very serious about this, and I think there's a better chance that it works with him than maybe some of the other guys because of how he's gone about it. And really, he's a very smart guy. He appreciates the nuances of the game. Let's not forget who he played for in college. And he's also someone, I think, who understands that not every kid that steps on the floor is as talented as he was. And that's the other challenge great players have. They have a hard time. Larry Bird even said, the hardest thing about coaching is understanding that these guys are not me. And I think Jerry gets that, and some of the coaching experiences he's had already and just being around the game has helped him understand that.
Okay, let's say that Jerry Stackhouse was not picked or does not take the Vanderbilt job. What do you think Jerry Stackhouse is doing next year? What kind of coaching opportunities, if he doesn't get one in the coming year, do you think he would have eventually gotten if it were not for Vanderbilt?
Well, I think he would have had options, a variety of options. Obviously, coaching in the G League is one. And the thing that's kind of neat about coaching in the G League is there's a developmental aspect to that. I mean, it is a developmental league. So you're teaching kids. You're not just rolling the ball out there and coaching. You're not just managing egos. You're teaching kids similarly to how you might in college. So that is an interesting approach for a lot of guys that want to get into coaching and they want to have experience at the next level. And, a guy like Jerry can, or someone who does that, they can tell college kids, hey, I kind of know what it's like in the NBA. I know it's like in the developmental league. I know now what it's like in college. I know what you need to do to get to point A and then point B. So I think it actually would help him. As far as what he'd be doing, I don't really know for sure. I know the opportunities would be there for a lot of different things. And I actually thought there was a chance that he might join UNC staff if somebody else moved on. Let's say Brad Frederick or Hubert Davis took a job somewhere else as a head coach. A lot of the scuttlebutt around here was that Jerry would be in line to join Roy Williams' staff, and that was something that would be an easy fit. It wouldn't be something where Roy would bring in a guy and just kind of start from scratch with him. Jerry would have been would slide in and handle a lot of those roles and would be a legitimate college assistant coach. And the reason I say legitimate is to the same concern or question you had when you first heard his name. People don't often associate the NBA guys with being legitimate college coaches because we kind of compartmentalize the college game and the pro game so much that they don't really intertwine much. The college coach can't have success at the NBA level, even though that's been debunked. The NBA guy can't have success at the college level. We've seen examples where it has worked. Jerry is a guy who I think kind of blurs those lines, and he's done it intentionally because how he's gone about this process since he stopped playing.
Andrew, you obviously run a large community of North Carolina fans. What was the specific reaction to him getting the Vanderbilt job in your community?
Excitement. People were really happy for him because a lot of the fans have sort of followed his path since he stopped playing. And his name has come up for a few years about, like I said a minute ago, about how he could eventually maybe be on the staff or somehow, some way end up at North Carolina at some point, perhaps as an assistant. Now that he is a head coach and that he's got a good job. Vanderbilt, most of the Carolina fans that I've interacted with understand that's a good job. Vanderbilt's a program that has won. It's won under different coaches in different eras. My Vanderbilt experience goes back to the days when Phil Cox was there and then when Will Perdue came along. I remember when they were good back then and the uniqueness of the building that they play in. And there is a culture there. And if Vanderbilt started winning again, it's going to be a big deal and it will be a hard place to play on the road in that league like it's usually been. So I think people realize, he goes in there and wins and shows that he can run a program at a school like that and does well. Well, you line up the years. Let's say Roy coaches 5 to 7 more years, and Jerry has a lot of success. And it's an easy sell to the administration if he can run a program at Vandy, and he can run one at North Carolina in the sense that of the other particulars that are involved. It's not just coaching basketball. So I think a lot of fans are actually excited. They want him to do well, and then they want to poach him from Vanderbilt whenever Roy retires. I think a lot of people think that's the perfect way to have somebody take over for 20 years after Roy leaves because they're very much about having the program taken care of, and they would absolutely prefer that it's in the hands of somebody who is one of them. And Jerry certainly fits that. He's from Kinston, North Carolina. He was a great player for 2 years there. He came back and got his degree. He's been around the program for a long time. His son was a walk-on football player for a couple of years ago. So, Jerry has been an active part of the UNC community ever since he stepped foot on campus as a freshman. And they think that it would be a very natural move if he's ultimately the guy that takes over for Roy. So, yeah, people are really excited, and some have already penciled that in, believe it or not.
Yeah, I think you hit on an important thing there. And not a lot leaks out of Vanderbilt, but what I did hear was that a lot of the negotiations took a little longer because of the buyout, I guess protecting Vanderbilt from certain opportunities. I'm guessing he probably had North Carolina written in his contract as an out if it happens. Who knows, maybe an NBA coaching job. Did anything make your way back to your community about what that might have looked like, or what do you suspect might have been in there?
No, and honestly, I haven't really looked into it, but I did have a conversation for a couple of minutes with a colleague, and we both agreed that I would think that if something happened and North Carolina came calling, that it would be an easier out than, let's say, if Kentucky or Kansas came calling, or any other program for that matter, or certainly even an NBA job. I would think that Jerry probably, if he does think long term, hey, if it works here, maybe I'm the guy that replaces Roy. If that entered into his thought process at all, I would think that the wording with going to UNC at his alma mater might be different than the wording for any other job. That's just a guess. I don't have any inside information. I know that as contracts go, especially when a guy takes a job not at his alma mater at a different school, but there is the chance that the alma mater may come up, it's usually a little tweaking in the language. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case with Jerry.
I look at his task, Andrew, and it's daunting because you look at the SEC on the roster of coaches, it's incredible. Bruce
Yeah,
Pearl.
and it's getting better.
Oh, yeah, it is. And it got better with Eric Musselman going to Arkansas.
Yeah.
I guess it did. I thought that Mike Anderson was actually a pretty good coach there, but they were ready to move on for whatever reason. I mean, throw Stackhouse aside because we don't know what he'll do. I guess the weak link in the league maybe is Conzo Martin at Missouri, who's done some nice things. Maybe it's Mike White at Florida, who I think is a good coach. I mean, that's the caliber of coach that you have in this league.
Yeah.
My concern for him is, boy, that's a lot to bite off, coaching against those kind of guys who've been in this game, sometimes 2 and 3 decades and had a ton of success. How does he combat that?
Well, two things. One, the SEC, top to bottom, may have the deepest collection of coaches in the country. Number two, since we're talking SEC basketball, which I enjoy doing, two of the programs that historically have really solid basketball traditions and support, Missouri and Arkansas, have been down. So at some point, they're going to make the right hires, and they're going to be up. And that's just going to strengthen SEC basketball across the board even more. Missouri, you could argue for a stretch, was the best program in college basketball to never have been to a Final Four. We all know what Arkansas's history is, and it wasn't just under Nolan Richardson. They had success before he got there. So more to your question, I think Jerry's going to look at this as like, look, I'm inheriting a program that just went 0-18 in the league. I can't worry about anybody else. We got to do what we got to do here. We got to get better, build a culture. You don't even reestablish when you got to start from scratch, build a culture, which will be probably his number one challenge, because he'll be able to get some kids to go there. They'll be able to get some talent. But what kind of culture do those kids walk into? What is the climate for learning, for growing, how they deal with setbacks? Because he's going to be all gung-ho. But the reality is, if they go 4-14 next year, that's a great year. That's a lot of improvement. So this is going to be a process. So he has to have the patience in order for the culture to be the right climate for those kids to learn. So he can't worry about the rest of the league. He can't at all. And I actually think for a guy getting his first job like that, and it is a big step, for him to inherit an 0-18 situation is actually the best case scenario, because it's ground floor stuff. There's nothing to compare him to. He's walking in and essentially starting from scratch. And I hope the administration has a lot of patience with him, because he's going to make mistakes. But he's a smart guy, and I think he'll learn from those mistakes. Just don't worry about the other programs. Just worry about Vandy. Get it going with there. Reach out to the many quality, wonderful players that have been a part of that program in the past. Start connecting with them and making them a part of the culture, and it can work. Vandy's won under a lot of different coaches before, as you well know, and Vandy can win again and will win again. And maybe Jerry's the guy to get that going. If he is, I would imagine the process will be a few years. And when the light finally goes on, when people finally realize, you know what, this is significant improvement. I think they'll be pretty good. I actually believe that he's going to do a good job there. It has nothing to do with where he went to school because, as you know, I have no affiliation to UNC. I just run the site and cover the teams. But what I know about him and my experiences around him tell me that if there's a guy in this situation that could get it done, he's that guy.
A couple things you said there, Andrew, that I wanted to respond to. First of all, Malcolm Turner just got this job and I think got a good number of conditions. And he got his guy apparently a 6-year, $18 million contract. So I do think there's going to be some patience built in. And I think that, Bryce Drew, obviously some people have said, well, they let him go too early after 3 years. I think that opened some, raised some eyebrows in the coaching and media community. But if you were here and watched it, it was pretty much a disaster. I won't get into all that, but that's one thing. I do think you'll have some security. The second thing is one complaint that I have heard was that Vanderbilt and that staff didn't do a great job, I think, of reaching out to and communicating with its alums. They had a big reception for Jerry with a lot of those guys. I saw Will Perdue there, right next door to where they had the media thing on Monday. How do you think he will do in terms of networking, interfacing with boosters, and sort of bringing them back into the program for a situation where between the old AD and between Bryce Drew's sort of, I guess, introverted personality is a good way to put it. How will Jerry Stackhouse do in terms of rebuilding those relationships?
Well, he's learned and been a part of, I think, the strongest basketball family in college basketball in North Carolina. It's incredibly deep. It's those guys all share DNA, and that may sound corny to some people, but it's real. I've seen it firsthand. In some capacity for 23 years, I've covered UNC and the ACC, and it's just different there. And he's learned how to network within. He's learned how to bring those forces together and keep them together, and have everybody sort of be a part of the program. Even still, you go to a game there, and the former players that you see, they're cheering. They're wearing the stuff and they're cheering. They're not just props because, hey, let's say hello to Tyler Zeller, or let's say hello to Tyler Hansbrough or Donald Williams or whoever. It runs deep, and they're cheering, and they are around the program, and the kids, they I wouldn't say they get inundated, but they are surrounded by the culture of success. That what all those guys from all their different eras go through. Let me give you an example of something, and this is speaking to what you're saying. The media room used to be right off the tunnel where the Tar Heels run onto the court, and there's a restroom in there, okay? And some of the former players that kind of hang out, they get to walk in there and use the restroom. Well, I know this may not be the greatest story, but it speaks to what I'm talking about here. So I'm in line at the restroom a couple years ago, and in front of me is Lenny Rosenbluth, who was the 1957 National Player of the Year, led that team to a 32-0 record. They beat Wilt Chamberlain in Kansas in the finals. Behind him and in front of me is Antoine Jamison, the 1998 National Player of the Year. Then it's me, and right behind me was Phil Ford, the 1978 National Player of the Year. My point is, they're around. And they're in the restroom. They're in the media room. They're walking in the tunnel, in the hallways. They're in the stands. They're all over the place. Now, Vanderbilt doesn't have that extensive of a history, but it does have a history. And it has a culture, and a culture that those people are proud of. And Jerry will understand how to tap into that and how to use that to the benefit of the program. And that will help his process, because like you said about Bryce, I've heard the same thing, that he was aloof and didn't really connect. Jerry's not a guy that's going to walk into the room and have you on the floor laughing. He's not that kind of personality. He's a very serious guy. But if he builds that cadre of family around him, and they can help reestablish a culture or build a culture for him along with what he does, that's all a big part of the process. Because when kids visit North Carolina, yeah, Roy Williams is a great guy. Yeah, Hubert Davis is a great guy. But it's the other stuff there too. That's a big selling point. And Jerry will understand how to get what he can out of the Vanderbilt history and the culture of the program and the university to have that work to his advantage.
Andrew, I've got a few questions from listeners if you've still got a few minutes.
Sure.
Our mailbag is presented by Vanderbilt fan Josh Minton, an independent insurance agent operating out of Brentwood. Looking for a one-stop shop to take care of your insurance needs? Josh has you covered. Call him today at 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Twitter at Joshua Minton HQ or on Facebook at facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He is my insurance agent. Give him a try. Tell him you heard about it on our podcast. Dorking asked, what do you know about the likely assistants?
I don't. I honestly don't. I was swamped covering UNC through Kansas City, and then I've been knee-deep in spring football. I have no idea who the assistants are, but he's got a connection to a deep database of people in college, in basketball, through his UNC connections and his other connections that I'm sure that he's not going to have any trouble finding 4 quality people that will help him build the program.
Yeah, Adam Sparks of the Tennessean reported that he is looking at getting an established college assistant or someone with college experience. I think he said someone with NBA connections, and the third one would be a grassroots kind of guy. Now, I'm thinking that the established assistant, Matt Doherty is a name that's come up a lot. Would that be one that would surprise you if he took that job?
It would. That's an interesting connection there. Matt was when Jerry was at UNC, Matt was an assistant at Kansas at that time. I think he made transitions from Davidson to Kansas around that time. And of course, Matt had a rough time at UNC as the head coach, but he has kind of redeemed himself, if you will. And he's back in the good graces at UNC, and the ill will from both sides, I think, is gone. So I think Matt, as an assistant, would be a pretty good choice because of his experiences. And he's spent some time here in recent years as an NBA scout. So he certainly would be a guy that has dipped his hands into about every basketball basket there is. So Jerry would be wise to have someone with his experience and his knowledge and his connections as well on the staff. So I think given that it's 2019, Matt would probably be a pretty solid choice.
Dorking also wants to know how strong his recruiting connections are, that being Jerry Stackhouse.
Well, there's not one house in the state of North Carolina that he would walk into where people would do a double take and say, who? And there's a lot of talent in this state. A lot of the talent, North Carolina can only go after so many guys. NC State can only go after so many guys. And really, I think Jerry can get into about any basketball living room in the country. So that's good. Bryce Drew, his claim to fame, and I'm not dumping on him at all. His claim to fame obviously was the shot that beat Ole Miss in the 1998 NCAA tournament. And then, of course, his dad built the Valparaiso program and was known as giving some of the great press conferences of all time, which I've been in a couple of them. Otherwise, Bryce Drew probably had trouble getting into doors. Jerry's not going to have trouble getting into doors. He played for Dean Smith. He's very close to Roy Williams. It's hard to find 2 better recruiters than those guys. So I think Jerry, again, he'll learn from some mistakes. He'll learn how things are on the road, and will probably do a pretty good job recruiting. Jerry is a very, like I say, he's a very serious guy, very believable guy, very honest person, very upfront. And I think that will play well in his recruitment because he's not going to blow smoke up kids, what. He's going to be straightforward with them. That approach worked for Dean Smith. It worked for Roy Williams. And my guess is that's one thing for certain that Jerry will apply that he's learned from those guys.
Okay, we talked earlier in the podcast about Jerry Stackhouse getting into coaching and the possibility that he could have had other jobs, pro jobs, maybe college jobs. Theodore 8 wants to know specifically why you thought he chose to take a college job instead of maybe a pro job that could have been offered to him.
Without talking to him about it, and I have not listened to his press conference, I don't know for certain. However, I think the interest was there based on what I do know from him being around the UNC program and trying to learn as much as he can from Roy and the staff in recent years. I think he was just drawn to it. I think maybe he prefers to coach where he in a venue where he can affect young people's lives. And in the pros, it's just about basketball. In college, it's about something different. And I know that he has spoken in the past about, even though he only played 2 years at UNC, the impact that Dean Smith had on his life. And a lot of guys get into it for those reasons. I talked to a lot of college coaches, both football and basketball, that one of the things that they enjoy the most about it is affecting young people's lives. And they're very genuine when they say it's not something they say in a presser because they want a good sound bite. It's the kind of stuff they say off the record in a hallway when it's just the two of you. And you can see it over time if they get those results. You can see how they handle kids when issues come down the pike. And from everything I know about Jerry Stackhouse is he's very serious about things along those lines. And I can see that being probably the drawing card. And maybe he enjoys the college game a little bit more too. I don't know. But I think that, again, he's somebody that with his vast NBA experience and sort of the travels that he's had, that he is somebody that will adapt fairly quickly and has a chance of actually having a sustainable career as a college coach.
Okay, we touched on some things with this one too earlier, but I'll ask this as an opportunity for you to expand on some of those thoughts. Bighorn Sheep says, I think I read where Stackhouse had come back to UNC to spend some time with Roy Williams at some point. Any possible insight on that? And if so, what types of things was Jerry Stackhouse wanting to pick Roy's brain on?
Well, Roy's program is as much about communication. And again, I don't want it to sound corny, but it's true because I've covered Duke for a long time too. And the reason both programs have been so successful are pretty similar. And communication and honesty in the program is so important. Kids got to know where the coach stands at all times. If you have a program where kids don't know, then they congregate with one another asking what's going on. How come the coach said this, but this ends up happening? And then guys start to lag out, and that's how a coach loses the locker room. I've never heard of a situation, either Duke or UNC, where the coaches lost the locker room, with the exception when Matt Doherty was UNC's coach. And in 2012, Coach K had a rough locker room at Duke. That was the Austin Rivers team, and that was an interesting story unto itself. But otherwise, communication and honesty and everyone knowing where they stand have been vital parts of those programs' success. And it is 100% what Roy Williams, bases how he communicates with his team. The kids always know where they stand. He doesn't hide anything from them, but he does it in a way where he doesn't whack them over the head constantly. Roy's the kind of guy that will tear into you and then give you a hug. And good coaches are like that, whether it's Dabo Sweeney at Clemson. I can't speak about Saban because he's certainly on that personality. I've never covered him, so I don't know. But most of the really successful coaches that I've been around and covered kind of go about things that way. Jerry certainly was trying to learn those nuances from Roy. And a lot of what he did around the program wasn't sitting in a room and having Roy X and O things. It was just observing how things are run on a day-to-day basis. It's that culture that I was talking about. I think that he understands culture is extremely important. As I said earlier, he's going to get some kids, but what kind of climate are they going to be in? And that's really important. I'd be willing to bet you, of all the things he learned from spending a lot of time around Roy Williams and his program, it's the culture, the climate, the daily drumbeat of how they go about things, not too high, not too low, are probably the things he took from that experience the most. And that will serve him best at Vandy, especially the trying times that he's going to have to endure the next couple of years.
This last question may be one that you don't really want to touch, but Ann Arbor says he wants to know your comments on the Duke Zion Williamson bribery allegations. If true, what could that mean for Coach K? I think, and I have not followed this extensively, I think he's referring to the Michael Avenatti allegations, which frankly, that guy is a liar and has been caught on tape saying he was willing to lie about stuff. I don't know how much credibility I give any of that, but maybe you have some thoughts I don't.
Yeah, no credibility whatsoever. I mean, I can't imagine many people in our country that have less credibility than him. And he's trying to raise eyebrows and, I've been around the Duke program for a long time. I would never say never with any program, but I certainly would be surprised. I don't know Zion personally, but I have people on our staff that covered him a lot. Dina King was at his announcement. She covered him quite a bit in high school. And the people that covered him at Duke that I've talked to say nothing but the most positive things about the kid. In fact, a lot of people that know him were agitated at how much publicity he was getting and how overhyped he was. In fact, one shining moment the other night, he appeared 7 times, more than anybody from Virginia appeared on there, which is ridiculous. And what's happened is, as a result, a lot of people don't like Zion. They've never met him. They've never had any interaction with him. They know nothing about him other than the fact he's a great player at Duke and was way overhyped. So they don't like him as a result. And the people that know him say there is no reason to not like this kid. He's fairly humble. He's confident but humble, decent kid, comes from a good family, was a good student in high school, and, respected the Duke culture and didn't walk in there saying, this is my program, get out of my way, like a lot of one-and-done types do. He was not destructive to the culture at all. He embraced everything there. So I can tell you that about him. I don't know anything about the Avenatti's allegation, if there's any merit to it. I think considering who made the allegation, I'm basically ignoring it until somebody else with credibility is able to come up with something like this. Then it becomes a story. But I would be surprised if there's much truth to it, because Coach K doesn't need to cheat. So I don't see any reason why he would, or why his handlers would, or anybody connected to him would. I know that stuff goes on a lot at a lot of places, and it's usually third-party exchanges of cash and goods and everything else. But there are some programs that don't need to, and Duke is absolutely probably at the top of that list.
Andrew, where do you think this whole FBI-related scandal is headed with all the fallout from it? I mean, we've been a year and a half into this. I don't know that all the things have dropped yet like was originally predicted when this broke, I guess, 2 Augusts ago now. But any sense on where this whole thing goes?
I would be surprised if it ends up impacting programs and coaches' careers like people initially thought. Sean Miller still got his job. And that was 14 months ago we heard that audio. He still got his job. And they had a bad year. He gave them an out to go ahead and get rid of him and say, you know what, we need to cut bait. We need to change. We need to be proactive. Will Wade's suspended, but he's not fired. I mean, I don't know. I'd be hard pressed to think that he's going to continue on there, because that seems like we have a little bit more on that situation than we do maybe Sean Miller. Bottom line is, until there is the kind of evidence that is absolute, that the NCAA uncovers itself, because they do have bylaws about how they obtain information, how they use information to punish. And I learned a lot about that covering the UNC situation, that I would be surprised if it ends up as bad as a lot of people want it to. And I would caution college basketball fans from celebrating too much when they think, man, Kansas is going to come down, or Arizona is going to come down, or, boy, this Zion stuff may bring Duke down. It doesn't help the sport if any of those programs end up getting in a lot of trouble for this, especially a Kansas and a Duke, because they are at the upper echelon. There are 6, I call it the fabled 6: Kansas, Duke, Kentucky, Carolina, Indiana, and UCLA. And Indiana's kind of hanging by a thread in that group. And it's not good for college basketball, which is struggling in the regular season now to maintain what it once had. If the programs that people identify with are suddenly whacked and have to rebuild, I don't think it's good for the sport. So I hope people aren't rooting for these things to be true. I am cautioning our subscribers, our members, about that, the Duke thing that came out the other day with Zion. I'm like, guys, A, it's Avenatti. Don't give him any credibility. And B, Duke going down is not good for North Carolina. Duke and North Carolina being at the top, they help each other out. They prop each other up. They're good for one another. Sometimes what you think might be fun and exciting and let's see them crumble is actually not a good thing, because it would hurt the health of college basketball. And I think that's what people should be most concerned about if they are a college basketball fan.
Last thing, what do you make of what is going on at LSU? Is this a thing where LSU is getting it's legal stuff in a row? Is this kind of a dare to the NCAA?
I think so, yeah.
Or what is this?
Well, I think it's interesting. Not to go too far to the Carolina situation. Carolina, kind of dropped its drawers and said, "Do what you can do" to the NCAA. They gave them everything, and that's part of what led to other things that prolonged that whole situation. Now, at Arizona, they basically said, "Screw you. Catch us if you can," basically. We're going to keep this guy and we're not going to comply. I think LSU has sort of kind of figured things out because it is a little bit different because you had a player named and a player was playing and they actually played him afterward. So they're kind of saying, yeah, well, we're going to dot our I's and cross our T's with respect to Will Wade. We're also going to take our chance with this as well. Because I think a lot of people are hearing sort of what I said a few minutes ago, that it's going to be ugly and it's not going to go away for a while. But in the end, what really is going to happen? A few assistant coaches have been busted, but those aren't programs. Those are individuals. And getting programs, I think, is going to be very, very difficult. People around here are concerned about NC State because Dennis Smith, and there's evidence that a significant amount of money exchanged hands. But NC State hasn't stepped forward and self-imposed or anything like that. They're going to sit back and see what happens, just like everybody else does. I mean, if they have to punish everybody that probably, has something that's happened with respect to this FBI thing and the number of schools that may really be involved in minimally or significantly, there's going to be a lot of schools in trouble. And I just don't think it's going to work out that way.
Andrew, thank you for the generous time that you spent with us today. You do a terrific job of running Tar Heel Illustrated, which is the North Carolina site at the Rivals Network. Tell people about where they can find your site, your Twitter handle, anything else like that you would like to promote.
Twitter at Heel Illustrated, not Heels, but at Heel Illustrated, and TarHeelIllustrated.com. You can find our stuff. A lot of our stuff is free, and if you love college football, we are knee-deep in spring football right now. We're rolling stuff out like crazy. We've got Mac Brown there, which has been really exciting for us as journalists and also for the fans, that they've gotten kind of a reboot in the world of football because things have gotten very stale under the previous regime. So there's a lot of excitement at UNC right now.
Thanks for joining us, Andrew.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, he's Andrew Jones of Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm Chris Lee, the host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. Keep listening. We've got more episodes coming later in the week.